Now, we found out, and I discovered this in the early 90s, that there's somewhere between 100 and 200 billion a year basically just being stolen going into these illegal projects. And so when Sheehan and I looked at this attorney, I said, look, if all these people who have a need to know in the constitutional chain of command are being lied to, deceived, and what have you, I'm going to declare all those projects rogue, a priori, illegal. Therefore, anyone who signed a security oath for them, I'm going to unilaterally announce that they're released from them. So all of you listening, if you've been in any of these projects with Lockheed, Northrop, SAIC, the CIA, you do not have to go by the secrecy. Because if they are denying access to the people who are in the constitutional chain of command, which I can prove they have in a court of law, those projects are rogue, and therefore those security oaths have no enforceability. Now, whether or not you have the courage to come forward is another question. But what I was very glad to be able to do between the early 90s and 2001 with the Disclosure Project is to pull together the people who did have the courage. And they're still coming forward. I mean, we have people contact me all the time who are in these projects who give us information, intelligence, and it's really a citizen's effort. I mean, I've never been in the government my entire life, but I think this is what you have an idea, and if the idea picks up steam and people see the reason for it, but the other thing is to do it in a way where people feel supported. And that's why we did this in a way where there were dozens that came out at once. I mean, I think in the initial batch of people who came forward, it was about 70.
One of the things I always want to get into people's heads when they start talking about the government or the people in charge or, you know, those in the know, the idea that they're exchanging information has been proven false time and time again.
Right.
Not only that, what's really blown me away lately is finding out that, especially in this supposed patriotic time of war, we have government factions that don't like other government factions.
Well, it's always been that way.
I was blown away when Petraeus was outed by the FBI. That is nuts. You're talking about the head of the CIA, and the FBI is spying on him over an affair, and you're going to bring down this beloved national hero.
Right. Stupid.
Unbelievably stupid, but also unbelievably revealing about how partitioned our government truly is, and how difficult it would be to get access to some critical information if this information is in any way deemed too sensitive or too controversial or too paradigm shifting for average eyes.
Well, let's make this very simple. If you acknowledge that the UFOs are there and they're real, and anyone with an IQ over mud is going to ask the question, then how did they get here? If you ask that question, we have the answers for it. And if the public knows that, then they know we don't need ExxonMobil, we don't need oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, or a centralized utility grid.
But that's assuming, though, that most people believe that the UFOs are real.
50 to 60% do now. Well, no, actually, there was just a poll that came out a month ago, and there's actually 43% of the public believe that extraterrestrial life has been on the planet and is here now.
2010, they got 51%.
You know, here's the bigger issue is that if you bring this information out,
right,
bodies,
so when you're talking about experiences, you're talking about experiences from people who are 100% credible, bulletproof, eyewitness testimony.
And not only that, but if you have the former Minister of Defense of Canada say that he checked out with a U.S. Air Force general, that in fact there was an accident that happened in New Mexico in 1947, which people call Roswell, and that what Colonel Corso wrote in his book The Day After Roswell was substantially correct. And this is the Honorable Paul Hellyer, and he and I did a press conference in Toronto a couple of years ago, and he has completely verified this. So the question is, and the same thing happened with five-star Admiral Lord Hill Norton. I mean, here he was the Minister of Defense, and he found out after the fact that, in fact, an extraterrestrial vehicle had landed at the Bentwaters Royal Air Force Base at Rendlesham Forest in England. And we have multiple Disclosure Project witnesses who were there. And it came out recently that the Ministry of Defense in Great Britain released the documents on that where they had physical evidence that this thing actually did land and left physical traces, et cetera, and so on. So I tell people, Usually the New York Times say, well, we need 2 or 3 corroborating witnesses to something, particularly 3 if it's a very controversial story. I say, yes, but the Disclosure Project has hundreds of these sort of people, thousands of cases like this. And we're not talking about just people seeing something in the sky.
Right, but they mean witnesses per event. They don't mean like overall.
Yeah, but we have multiple ones for this landing at Rendlesham Park. We have multiple ones from the Minot, North Dakota event.
How many do you have?
Where there will be some of them, 4, 5, 6 at one event. And they all have very the same credible story. Military people. Mm-hmm. And so why isn't the mainstream news reporting this if you put together this amount of information? And then the question becomes, how free is our media? And how free is our market? And how free is our country? Because I think there's more corruption than people can imagine. And I'm not a conspiracy theory person. I mean, this is not a matter of belief.
Most people believe, and I'll quote Neil deGrasse Tyson, who says that eyewitness testimony is the least reliable of all pieces of evidence.
That's right.
But what physical evidence do you have that goes along with eyewitness testimony that you believe is the most compelling?
Well, I think the most compelling that I've ever seen is something we're working on right now. I was introduced to an institute that acquired a small humanoid being, about 6 inches in length.
This is in the trailer for Sirius. I've seen this little skeleton that's x-rayed.
Mm-hmm. And CAT scanned, and we're now doing the genetic work up at the top university in the world that's doing this.
Pull that up, Brian, because it's very freaky. People on Ustream and Vimeo can see this. You know what? Let's just play the entire trailer for you and get people excited about this movie. Now, who found this alien being, and where did they acquire this thing?
All I'm saying is that it is an organic being.
It is an organic being.
It is. The CAT scan shows lungs on the inside. It has 10 ribs and not 12. We have now proven from bone density that it's at least several years old, and it's only 6 inches long. So the team.
How do you prove that from bone density?
When you're dealing with look at the epiphyseal plates and how much calcium. In other words,
right, but that's humans, isn't it? Why you're dealing with a completely alien species?
No. I'm saying if you were to go back, if you're going to assume that it's not ET,
mm-hmm.
then you look at it. What would this be if it were human?
I see what you're saying.
Okay, so you have to go through an algorithm and it's a diagnosis of exclusion. We could say in medicine, because if it's not a miscarried or aborted fetus, which is the size of what this would be, about 22 weeks, if it's not any known primate. It's not a fossil because it has organic material and DNA material. We've already extracted. We clipped one of the ribs, 2 of the ribs, and have gotten the DNA material out of the rib of internal marrow. And so this is being processed right now as we speak, literally.
So if it was a human, it would be several years old. So that proves that it's not a human.
There is no form of dwarfism or any other genetic anomaly known in the literature, according to the world's expert in this area, that would explain something of this age that is this, and also that has these abnormalities. If you look at the skull, if you look at the fact that it has 10 ribs, there are no genetic syndromes where you have 10 ribs.
And have you seen this thing in person?
I was the third person to hold it and handle it. And I did I didn't say autopsy on it, but I did the tests on it. And
how long had it been dead for?
We have no idea.
No idea.
That we didn't get enough material from. We didn't want to damage this little thing too much. So the carbon dating on it will be the next step. We wanted to be sure we had enough genetic material, and if we had to go back, we didn't want to destroy. Anyway, so we're working a scientific algorithm on this. This is actually the people, the public, who are supporting the film Sirius, are the reason why we were able to do all these studies.
How is this thing preserved?
It was found in a very, very dry desert area, and it's just very desiccated. It's very dried out, and it was not in any sort of preservative. And now it died a traumatic death. We know it behind the right mastoid air cell, behind your ear here, the skull is crashed in, and it's a little asymmetric on the jaw, and the right humerus is fractured through and through. And it happened at mortem or shortly post-mortem. We think it was the fatal blow to this particular being. Now, what is this being? When you look at it, almost every scientist that has seen it goes, looks like an ET. But We don't know. All I'm going to say is that we're not going to be able to say, because even the genetics, there's no database to compare it to. Now, we have the whole human genome to compare it to, which is what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all the literature that the world's expert in skeletal abnormalities, the expert in the world, looked at this thing and said, this is nothing that I know of and that has ever been seen on this planet. And so the question then becomes, what is it? Now, it turns out it was found in an area of the Atacama Desert in Chile that native peoples have reports of these objects, luminous objects, going in and out of the foothills of the Andes.
Famous for
Very
UFO
famous,
sightings
yes,
in Chile.
very famous. And also in these remote native villages, there are reports of these very small beings, upright humanoid-type beings.
Isn't that also the area where they constructed the VLT telescopic array? One of the very large telescope, I believe.
I think there are, because it's a very dark area, and there have been a lot of astronomy. And we also know one of our witnesses who was manning a facility on the Peruvian-Bolivian border that's not too far from this area was there in the early 90s when we were using a SDI, Star Wars system, to track ET craft and hit them with electromagnetic pulse weapons. And one was downed and crashed on the Peruvian-Bolivian border.
We hit it with electromagnetic pulse weapons.
Yeah, this is...
So who did this? The Air Force, the Army? Like, do we know?
Yeah, we know, but I mean, it's this group Majestic.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, if you were to talk to the general I briefed, who's head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is almost as big as the CIA that's in the Pentagon, he didn't know anything about this. So when you say who's doing it, it's not. It's kind of almost not the correct even way of framing it is to say, when Senator Inouye, he just passed away, wonderful senator from Hawaii, he said there exists a secret government with its own Air Force, its own funding mechanism, its own Navy. I'm quoting almost exactly, and actually this is a great speech by this senator. And it's because he had run across that this was going on. So the question is, who's running this? Well, they've gone off the reservation. There's certainly no congressional oversight or presidential oversight over these rogue elements. And I think that is a threat to our democracy, but it's also a threat to our security in the world. If what we've learned is true from multiple military insiders, that we have been attempting to target these extraterrestrial vehicles and down them, how stupid is that? And you're dealing with civilizations that could turn the Earth into a pink mist floating through space in a nanosecond, and we're there firing at them? Why? You're
convinced that this happened? Absolutely?
I absolutely know it has. Because I have too many insiders who've been present when we've done this sort of the weaponization of electromagnetic signals.
What about disinformation?
Most of the information out there is disinformation.
Right.
I would say.
Do you believe any of it's ever hit you? Like any of this might be disinformation?
Oh yeah, I have. No, not what I'm telling you.
No.
But have I ever been caught flat-footed? Yeah, almost. But we're very careful, and I have to say, as a doctor who got into this sort of accidentally, and then I was tutored and mentored by some really good people in the military and in the intelligence community who wanted me to do this. And one of them is still at the CIA. He's a PhD guy. And he says, someone needs to do this because the politicians are never going to deal with it, and these big corporations are absolutely not going to let it out. And this was back in the 90s. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? And, one of the interesting things, after we put this briefing together for Clinton and, Lawrence Rockefeller, I put the concept together of the best available evidence and all these cases. And then Lawrence Rockefeller hosted Bill and Hillary Clinton at the Rockefeller Ranch, and it had me out there shortly before that. And Mr. Rockefeller was the white hat in the family who wanted to end the secrecy, unlike some of his family. So he said to me one night, I was out on his porch on a deck in the Grand Tetons at the JY Ranch, and he said, we really need you to hurry up and do this. And I said, oh, Lawrence, I'm just a doctor in North Carolina. I'm working in an ER, He says, no, you have to do it. I said, no, Lawrence, you have to get these guys to do it. He says, they will never do it. And I said, Lawrence, for God's sakes, you're old, you're rich, and you're Rockefeller. And he says, no. He says, the implications of this are so vast and so profound that no aspect of life will be unchanged when it comes out.